Hi everyone, this is Tom, and today I'm gonna be talking about the League of Legends World Championship play-in stage, which is gonna start on Friday the 25th. So in just a few days, we will have the first League of Legends World Championship action, which is the first truly international competition we've seen since, I guess, the Mid-Season Cup, which was hosted between China and Korea. But even there, they were playing online, not really together on zero ping, so it was a bit different. And it's obviously going to be very exciting and an interesting one because Vietnam unfortunately couldn't make it with their two teams. So we'll have an adjusted roster of teams, meaning that in the play-ins we'll have 10 teams. The Korean third seed Genji was promoted to the main event to fill the whole of the Vietnam first seed. But in the play-in stage we'll still have the fourth seed of the LEC and the LPL and the third seed of the LCS. Joined by obviously all the minor regions, which are the PCS, which was formed at the start of this year as a merger between two other minor regions. We have the LCL, we have the LJL, OPL, CBLOL, LLA, and the TCL. So, with that in mind, let's just go over the format real quick. Both the groups in the play-in stage consist of 5 teams. They'll play a single round robin, best of one against each other. So each team will play 4 matches in total in the round robin stage. From there on, the number 1 seed will be promoted directly to the world's group stage, and the other teams are seeded into in a best of 5 format where they it's like kind of gauntlet-ish. Only the 5th team in each group is unfortunately going to be out of world's contention immediately. But we'll go over the format as I see it. So actually, you know what? Without further ado, let me just pull up my predictions immediately, and we'll go over each of the teams as I discuss them and go over the groups as well. So there we go. Here you can see which teams I expect to make out and all the scores as well. But don't worry if it's a lot to take in at the moment or maybe a bit confusing. I'll go over each one of them. But let's first discuss each group. Because in Group A we have Team Liquid, the 3rd seed of the LCS, Mad Lions, the 4th seed of the LEC. We have Legacy Esports, who are the representative from the OPL. We have Papara Supermassive, which I have abbreviated here to Supermassive because otherwise the name would be too long to fit in my sheet. It just wouldn't look pretty. And we have Supermassive from TTL, and then we have INTZ, who come in from CBLOL. In Group B we have LGD, the 4th seed of the LPL. Then we have PSG Talent, the number 2 seed of the PCS. We have V3 Esports, who come in from the LJL from Japan. Then we have Unicorns of Love, the LCL Russian team. And we have Rainbow 7, the champions of the LLA Latin America. So, yeah, let's just go over each teams quickly. Team Liquid obviously finished 3rd in the LCS, which, I don't know, was a bit surprising from my end because, well, you have Broxah, you have Jensen, Tactical looked really good on that team as well, and they didn't look very strong, so I wasn't really impressed overall. As I've made known publicly a few times now, I'm not really very interested in the LCS because I think at this point, I think it's only a matter of time before LCS gets overtaken in that sense by regions like the PCS, because the LCS just doesn't have as large of a player base and also doesn't have a proper infrastructure for new talent to emerge. But also something like CBLOL already matched LCS a few times, or at least came very close to the viewership in LCS, so that those are regions that are quickly developing, and I think LCS is falling behind there. Yeah, I think in terms of skill, I really hope they prove me wrong this year, obviously. That would be quite a story, but in many ways they are slowly becoming more of a glorified minor region and less of a weak major region. So, yeah, Team Liquid obviously getting 3rd in that region, not very impressive, and I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of it. Then we have Mad Lions, also a team that was not too impressive in the latest phases of the competition that we've seen them in. They obviously started well this year in the spring split of the LEC, did well in the summer split of the LEC as well, but towards the end fell off drastically. And yeah, it really seemed that the pressure was getting to them, and that they weren't able to find their way, to enjoy playing the game, and suffered from the stress that was coming with playing these high stake matches. Now, I do think that the play-in stage will be very good for Mad Lions because they face some weaker teams, don't immediately have that high pressure, can get some time to get into the flow, and in terms of pure individual skill, these are obviously very good players. Then we have Legacy, OPL. I think many people will say that Legacy are by far, or at least the OPL is by far the region where we have the lowest expectation. I think rightfully so. If you look at OPL, it's a region that's completely isolated. It has its own infrastructure, and it has passionate fans, and it has a fun broadcast, and that's all good and well. But when you're this isolated and you can't really compete with other regions, and you can't really go across borders to find new talent, and it's all, what OPL obviously does is import Korean talent, but these will be players from Korea that are not good enough to play in the LCK or even in Challenger Series Korea. So that's difficult to improve as a region, and it's just in the LEC we've seen a few imports of OPL talent, and I think it's fair to say that for many teams that have imported OPL talent, it was more of a budget reason rather than investing in talent that is going to carry their team a lot forward. Then we have Supermassive, and Papara Supermassive did not as well in the spring split, which is called the winter split in Turkey. They've winter and summer instead of spring and summer, but they had some struggles internally where one of the players left the team mid-split because he was being bullied, and he accused some of his one of his teammates in particular of being homophobic, and Supermassive had to fill that roster hole, and so they couldn't make it work in the winter split, but then they made some roster changes for the summer split, and now they actually look pretty good, and it seems like everybody has forgotten about the drama that happened in the team, and now this is Turkey's go-to team. Then finally we have INTZ in Group A, and INTZ is a team that failed to show up entirely in the spring split, in split 1, because they made a lot of investment. They hired like a second team. They went with this 10-player dynamic, similar kind of to how Schalke did it in the LEC. But on INTZ, every player had to constantly fight for their position, and it didn't work out. Which resulted in INTZ almost being relegated out of CB LOL. They had to play a best of 5 series against one of the challenging teams, and they took it to 5 games. So they were incredibly close to actually losing out or missing out on being in the CB LOL at all. But in the second split, they did much better. They didn't go for this 10-man strategy where every player had to fight for their roster anymore. Instead, they just had their core team work together and improve there, and that worked out well for them. So let's go over Group A and what I expect here. As you can see in my predictions, there will be the group stage will be from September 25th to the 28th. And every team will play each other once. As I said earlier, it will be a single round robin in a best of 1 setting. I'm not sure how they're going to do the side selection, which might for some teams matter a bit, but since that's kind of a toss-up at the moment, I'm not sure. How you should read this table is that the teams on the left sides will have the score. So for example, Mad Lions I expect to win 1-0 over Team Liquid, but when you go to Legacy, I expect them to 0-1 against Team Liquid and Mad Lions. So because it's a single round robin, I wasn't really sure how to put it in a different way than this. So let's go over the teams in general. I think Mad Lions will win this group pretty easily. As I said earlier, I think that this is a team that has so much raw talent that it's hard to go against them in every position. They have somebody who at least can be above average, right? I think Humanoid has had some inconsistency, but even in the first few weeks of the LEC summer split, he was among the top performing mid laners in the region. He fell off a bit later, and then we have Orome in the top lane. I think is another position where you could say, okay, maybe he can't really carry, but he played Jugs, he played Renekton. He's not going to hold the team back. We have Shadow, who is maybe a bit of a limited champion pool in terms of, he knows how to play Lee Sin, he knows how to play Lilia very well, and if you ban those against them or know how to counter them, maybe you can give him a tough time. We saw his Nidalee performance, for example, was not too great in the summer split, but overall, I think that the teams they are facing here are not good enough to punish them consistently here, even though Supermassive has, for example, a good jungler in Kakao. We'll get to them later. And Team Liquid has Broxa. But yeah, so overall, I think Mad Lions is going to benefit a lot from this warm-up time. I think they will have had time to experiment a lot, get comfortable with the meta, get comfortable with playing with each other in a different country. And yeah, so that it's not going to be too difficult for them, I think, to make it out of this group. I think that they might lose one game, which might, like, I would have to guess would be against Team Liquid if they lose any. But other than that, they have this aggressive play style. They are very innovative. They can be very innovative when it comes to picking champions, and they have a big advantage, which is Peter Dunn, the head coach on their team, who is one of the, like in a friendly way, is kind of like Rain Man, where he watches all the regions and he studies really well, and he just, it's a big brain time, right? When you have Peter Dunn on your team. So if there's anybody who can scout the opponents very well, it's Peter Dunn, and I think this is going to be a big advantage for Mad Lions as well. Then Team Liquid, I expect to finish in a tight second place with Super Papa, the Supermassive. This may surprise some people that expect Team Liquid to lose actually twice, and especially because those are the matches that they will play against Supermassive. I think maybe some people would expect me to have a preference for Team Liquid over Supermassive, but I think Team Liquid overall is just being too sloppy, too inconsistent in that sense. While they have great players on their roster, absolutely, which is why I don't write them off immediately. I don't think, I just have very low expectations of NA overall, and again, I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they prove that they are actually worth it, but when I look at how this team has performed overall, I'm not too impressed. And I think, while maybe the Mad Lions match, if they lose, it might not be big of an upset. I think when you go a team like Supermassive, we'll get to them after this. I just think they are gonna get upset, and they're gonna be surprised because Team Liquid hasn't been that adaptive. And I think a team like Supermassive, let's just talk about them now, who have Zeednot and Bolulu, and they have Kakao, who is like one of the if like Kakao goes way back, he was at Worlds once before and has hopped across regions trying to find success, but he's still many people respect him as a jungler. And I think that they can surprise Team Liquid when it comes to their picks. Obviously, it's only a best of one, so it's kind of difficult to say how it's going to go. But if I had to choose, I would go for Supermassive. Then I think INTZ is going to finish fourth in the group. I think when I spoke to people who follow CBLOL about INTZ, it's that they have a very slow early game, and they always lose the early game, but they make it work in the mid into the late game. So why I think this is going to be punished severely, except against Legacy, who I think will finish last, is that all these regions are going to play more aggressively, are going to recognize that when they have an early lead, they're not going to give it away. Especially Mad Lions is known to play very aggressively, but I also think that Team Liquid and Supermassive are going to be able to do so. The only team I think will lose everything in Group A, there's obviously only going to be one team that loses everything, by the way, but is Legacy. and I think that they will. They have a lot to prove, right? As I said, Oceania last year they did decently with Mammoth, from which Destiny came actually, who was hired by Origin at the start of this year. But still, like, I think overall, when I've spoken to people across the board about the level of play that has been shown in their region, they say, okay, yeah, generally there is an upward trend. But then I've spoken to OPL and it's like, yeah, it's kind of the same. And you can't really stagnate if your opponents are improving, even if it's ever so slim, the improvement they make. So I expect Legacy to finish last. On the far right, you can see actually the scores that I think these teams will end with. And in a tie situation, I think the tiebreaker rules say that the result is the first tiebreaker, which means that Supermassive would be the number 2 team in Group A, then Team Liquid, then INTZ, and finally Legacy. So let me just get some water because... Then we go to Group B, and in Group B, we have LGD, we have PSG Talon, we have V3, we have Unicorns of Love, and we have Rainbow 7. I think this is an incredibly difficult group. LGD, let's start with them. 4th seed of the LPL are obviously going to be big favorites because the LPL is regarded as the strongest region in the world, and even a number 4 team is a good contender for in other major regions. Now, people have said, that in the LPL there's a big difference between top esports combined with JDG, who are at the top and are undisputedly the best teams in the region, and then you have Suning, and then you have LGD. But excuse me, I do think that it's just very difficult to go against the LPL. That, like, especially because, well, they have Peanut in the jungle, who is a very well-known name. Actually, people have been very excited about Kramer as well, who's a bot laner for LGD. And while GA in the mid lane might not be the strongest factor, in fact, I think people have been saying that he is often the weak link in the team, which is gonna be difficult, right? If your mid laner is gonna be the weak link, that's often not a good sign. But still, when they've held their own and beaten teams like FunPlus Phoenix, they came ahead of Invictus Gaming. How are you gonna how are you gonna say that LGD is not gonna make it out of this group? So, but we'll get to specific details later. Then we have PSG Talon, and unfortunately for PSG Talon, a few of their team members have not been able to make it in time to Worlds to start. So they have, for example, River, I think it's River, Tank, and Unified. I think River and Tank are gonna miss the entirety of the play-ins, and Unified will only miss a few matches and will arrive later. And they have been replaced by a few players from AHQ Esports, who also comes from the PCS. Now, that is obviously going to be very difficult for PSG. They have to adjust to new players. But PCS overall has been a pretty decent region, actually. And when you look at the minor regions minus VCS, I would say that PCS is the strongest team. So, like, they're the second strongest minor region in that sense. And there have been a lot of positive stories about PSG Talent and also about Mashi Esports, who are already in the group stage for Worlds. Now, fortunately for PSG Talent, they have their top laner, Hanabi, who is at least seen as kind of the leader of the team, in the sense that if Hanabi gets going, PSG Talent will win the match. Obviously, they're going to have a bit more difficult time against the international top teams. But it will be interesting to see if they can adjust to this new roster and adapt along the way. Then we have V3, who upset actually Detonation Focus Me, who were obviously the representative results last year. And kind of when you talk about the LJL, the Japanese league, people will say like, oh, that's Detonation Focus Me. Well, not anymore, because V3 is here. They have their jungler Boogie, who is a South Korean import who plays on V3 and came over from Flash Wolves. Same for Hanabi, by the way, on PSG Talent, also a Flash Wolves alumnus. But yeah, so on V3 you have Boogie, but you also have Archer in the bot lane, who are very good in their respective roles. And I think when I've been talking to people overall about the LGL, and they say like, okay, that's obviously not Korea yet, but they have the advantage that they can play on the Korean serve on high ping. It may be, but they will still reach high tier challenger ranks. And I don't think this is going to be V3's year to make it out of the group stage, but I do think that they are a team you should not underestimate, even though, you know, in the past we've not seen too many astounding things from from Japan. Then the fourth team we have is Unicorns of Love in this group, and I mean, if you don't know Unicorns of Love, you have not really been paying attention, I think, to League of Legends in the past decade, because they used to compete in EU LCS. We're a beloved team because, well, it's pink unicorns who shine brightly, and it's amazing. And then, but also they're just incredibly strong contenders, and you look at their year so far, and they went 13-1 in the regular spring split, and then they went 14-0 in the summer split. So you know, I think the only game they lost in the summer split was like they dropped one game in the playoff stage where they went 3-1 against their opponents, and after besides that they either completely, you know, won 1-0 in the round robin stage, or they went 3-0. So incredible dominance from Unicorns of Love this time around. I think they are one of the strongest teams that we may have seen in playing stage at all. Last year they even took Splice who to a fifth game in the playing stage when they were playing for their final game, who would make it to the group stage, right? And Splice eventually made it out of their groups and actually reached the quarterfinals. So this Unicorns of Love, it can only be stronger, I think, and I have high expectations of them. Then finally we have Rainbow 7. The LLA, unfortunately, is not one of the best teams. We saw Israel's Gaming last year, and it's a very memorable game for me. I don't remember. It was a very memorable moment, I should say, because they had an opponent. I don't know which opponent they were playing against, but Israel's Gaming were playing like a full dive comp. They had like a Nocturne ult, they had Galio, so like a full dive where they could single out any target and just bombard them to death. And in that game they went 1-17, I believe. So they got one kill, but immediately afterwards, the opponents got a quadra kill. So yeah, LLA has not been very impressive last year, and I don't think that they will do well again this year. Because as the competition is not that great. You in the LLA you have 8 teams competing, and the top 4 teams are all contenders for the #1 spot, are very close to each other, and there's a huge gap. And then you have the bottom 4 contenders. So that's problematic in a region when there's such a big gap, because that means that the competition is going to be limited. You're going to basically each of the 4 top teams are going to have 4 free wins during the regular split, or 8, and they're only gonna have a handful of actual competitive matches, right? And yeah, sure, last year in the LEC you could say G2 and Fnatic were by far the strongest teams, but at least some teams could sometimes put up a fight against them, and that's just not something that really happens in the LLA from what I've gathered. So looking at the matches and the predictions, as you can see them on the screen, I think LGD will win every single match. I think this is not something I'm gonna have to argue with for a long time. Then I think second of all is gonna be Unicorns of Love, and yeah, 3-1, only losing their match against LGD, because I think, as I said, they're gonna have a very good time in this group. Then both PSG Talent and V3 2-2. In the direct matchup, I actually think V3 will win it, because they have the advantage that their whole squad is together. And while I think maybe if PSG Talent was as their whole team, you know, together, that they could beat V3 because overall they'll perform at a higher level. I think that V3 has an advantage that they have their entire team together. So that would mean that V3 actually ends third in the group and PSG Talon fourth. But we'll get to this this later. Actually, and then finally we have Rainbow 7. I think they will go 0-4. A bit unfortunate for them. They may actually pick up one win, which I think would be against PSG Talon. Many people are very, very hyped immediately about PSG Talon, but I think that they face a tough challenge, and even though I have them advancing to the group stage, I'll get to that later why this happens. I do think that I don't know. I don't have high expectations from PSG Talent early on, is what I should say. I think they really need the first few games to warm up and to find out how this new team composition is going to work for them. So, with that said, we actually go to the playoff stage, which means that the way it works that both number one teams will advance to the group stage immediately of the main event. So Mad Lions and LGD are automatically advanced, and the number 5 teams are automatically dropped out. Now, this means that in Group A, Legacy in my predictions would bite the dust, and Rainbow 7 in Group B. The way it works then is that the number 3 and number 4 in each group play against each other in a best of 5 scenario. So in Group A, this would be Team Liquid versus INTZ for me, because I do think that Team Liquid ends third, as I said in the tiebreaker with Supermassive, and that INTZ ends fourth. Now, when it comes to this, even though INTZ's prediction, I'll point out we're here by the way at the moment, and I think that while INTZ is praised for their preparation, I think in a best of 5 scenario, you're just gonna have an advantage of Team Liquid being more used to playing best of 5s internationally with all the players on their roster, and that's why I think Team Liquid will win that match. Then they advance to the second match, and then there they will play the number 2 of Group B. So that's where a cross match happens, which means that they will play against Unicorns of Love. And I think against Unicorns of Love, Team Liquid is going to have a very difficult time, because Unicorns of Love is just insanely dominant, and kind of they have a mid laner, Nomans, who you should definitely keep an eye on during this tournament, because in the spring split he played I think 14 different champions in the mid lane, including like a Vayne and a Cho'Gath, and then in the summer split he played 15 different champions, no Vayne or Cho'Gath if I recall correctly. But this guy can play virtually anything in the mid lane, and he is very versatile, and I think that is something that Team Liquid is going to have a very difficult time dealing with. You saw, for example, that they weren't able to punish Bjergsen and Zilean, which is of a high caliber, so that is a high bar to set, right? To be able to beat Bjergsen and Zilean, but it does mean that they have difficulty pinning down these strategies, and I think in a best of 5 against Unicorns of Love can abuse that by switching things up and by adapting quickly and thinking on their feet and catching Team Liquid off guard. So yeah, actually I do think that Team Liquid is not going to make it to the main event, and the Unicorns of Love will advance. Now, the way I said earlier that PSG Talent I'm not too hyped on early on, and still, if you look at the bottom of the image I've shared here, you can see that I have them advancing. So why is that? Well, first of all, Unified, their bot laner, is going to be joining them at a later stage. So they will have their bot lane complete again, and they will still play with a different mid jungle, but this mid jungle is from the same team, so those two are used to each other as well. Now, this means that by the time that playoffs come around, I believe PSG Talent will have their will have their bot laner again, meaning that they increase in strength, and by this, I think they will actually edge out a victory over V3, and level up that play, because when you have it makes sense, right? When you have more members of a team that is better actually playing together, the overall skill and the overall level of the team should go up. And that's what I expect to happen against V3. I think while V3 has Boogie and an Archer working together, and they are very strong, I do think that PSG Talent is just one step ahead when they have Unified on it. If they don't have Unified by this time, I'm gonna say this and maybe build in a bit of a defense for myself already. If they don't have Unified by this time come around, I could see V3 take it, but otherwise I think PSG Talent will actually make it out. So then they face off against Supermassive because we have the cross again, and this is where PSG Talent is very fortunate, in my opinion, with that, well, quote-unquote luck of the draw, I suppose, where this cross section happens, because I think Group A overall is significantly weaker than Group B, which is why I think PSG Talent is going to have a tough time in the group stage itself, going 2-2 as I predicted. But when they emerge victorious and face the number 2 of Group A, they will have a better time, because I think Group A is just significantly weaker overall. And I think that there, especially if they've already won and founded synergy against V3 in the best of 5 in the first match, I do think that PSG Talent will actually pretty easily deal with Supermassive, because they have had even more time to find that synergy on the team. They have that talent on their roster that can perform so well. And yeah, there are some scenarios I see PSG Talent losing. Obviously, if Unified doesn't make it and they still have to play with the replacement bot laner, that's going to be difficult, because it's just, I suppose, you just have less team synergy in the sense, in the way you want it to work out. And another scenario would be, I suppose, if Supermassive is just stepping up incredibly well. I don't expect this to happen. I expect them to be okay-ish, hence the 2-2 score in the group stage. But I do think that, what the thing is, that in Turkey, there has the rise in level of play, from what I've gathered, has been slim, but it's been there. So unless, and it's obviously difficult to compare cross region, like judging completely based of just best of ones you see them play during the regular split, especially because in this playoff stage you're going to be playing best of 5s. So it is difficult for me to say how strong Supermassive is going to be internationally, but when you look at overall region strength and how they have been performing, I think that the PCS and which PSG Talent is from, has just had more competition, because they've combined 2 regions, they have the best players of 2 regions now in one competition, and PSG Talent came out on top there. So that's why I expect them to make it out of the group as well, which means that the 4 teams that I predict to make it out of the play-ins, as you could see at the top already, are Mad Lions from Group A, and then LGD, PSG Talent, and Unicorns of Love from Group B. Now, this would mean that Mad Lions automatically get seated in Group D of the main event, together with Top Esports, DRX, and FlyQuest. LGD will automatically be placed in Group C with TSM, Fnatic, and Genji, because all the other teams already have an LPL team in it. And then it's going to be a coin flip whether Unicorns of Love will go to Group A, or if it will be PSG Talent, and the other one of those 2 will go to Group B. But we'll get to that once the group stages arrive. To round up this video, I suppose, let me know in the comments below which regions you think will do well, or which predictions you agree with, which predictions you disagree with, and maybe even some players you are looking forward to facing. I recently wrote an article in which I highlighted a few players. For example, Hanabi, I think Boogie you should keep an eye on. Nomans, who I mentioned earlier. Who else did I write about? There's Jose Odeo on Rainbow 7, even though I don't think Rainbow 7 will do exceptionally well. He's apparently an incredibly good jungler. And Kakao, another jungler on Papara Supermassive, because of the history he has. So yeah, if you have any of these players or any of these teams you're particularly looking forward to, or if there are any predictions you want to share, let me know in the comments below. I'm super excited for Worlds 2020, and I'll be doing interviews as well. And yeah, so stay tuned for more content.